Cool. All right, guys. Just want to making sure my audio is working. Cool. So, hi everyone. Welcome back, and thank you so much for tuning in. My name's Christina, and I'm a texture and look development artist located in Adelaide, Australia. I'm also a judge on the Rookies and the host of this interview series. So this week, I'm really excited to be meeting Jay. So thanks again, Jay, for coming on. Now, Jay is also from Adelaide. That's really exciting. It's really cool to see local talent doing so well internationally. So yeah, Jay, thanks again for coming on. Why
Thanks
don't
for
you
having
just
me.
start things off by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, my name's Jay Blanco. I'm a concept artist and I also work as a 3D environment artist in Adelaide. And I work both freelance as well as in an animation studio, CDW Animation, which is kind of in relation to the school that I studied at, but it's also kind of a separate entity in itself.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And
Yeah, keep going.
did you,
Sorry.
sorry, I was like, I probably skipped over a few things. So I did study for 4 years at CDW Studios in association with Flinders University. So,
Mhm.
and I only recently graduated at the end of last year. And yeah, I guess I specialize in environments, though I've done a bit of character and other sorts of stuff along the way as well. And yeah, I don't know. It's probably enough for now.
Cool. So, Jay, at what point did you decide this was something you wanted to do?
Uh, I I've been in and out of uni a couple of times, and originally it was like I wanted to be an architect because that seemed like I kind of like design. I started to realize in high school, and architect seemed like design that you could get a job in. And I don't really know that much about the architecture industry now. Probably still quite easy to get a job in for all I know. But uh, yeah, I turned out I didn't actually really want to be an architect. I don't think. Like I liked architecture, but the actual
Mm.
thing of being an architect, or at least I wasn't ready for it at the time. Anyway, so then I spent a bunch of time fuffing about and working part-time jobs, and eventually found a friend gave me a drawing tablet, a Wacom tablet, and I was like, he's because he knew I used to draw in high school, and he's like, hey man, would you sort of want this? And I was like, yeah, I guess this will be fine. And I started looking at like tutorials and stuff online and then I started to find concept art ones. And then I found there's this sort of whole new world exploded to me. And I think there was one point that somebody said that you couldn't really do it as a backup plan. And I remember
Mm.
that was the point where it kind of finally kind of clicked in my head that it's like, are you just kind of got to go for this now, or else you won't kind of get to that point? Because at that point, I wasn't, I was kind of like, didn't really see it as a career because I didn't kind of know it could be. And the more I sort of learned it was, I realized that it was sort of like I had to kind of go all in on it.
Mm.
And I don't know if that is the case. I'm sure some people have lots of varied ways they go about stuff, but I think it kind of worked being a bit extremely sort of focused on it for a while. Yeah, I guess that was a turning point was, yeah, kind of being like, you can't really do this and something else along the same time. Well, something
Mm.
completely different. You can't be an astronaut and a rally driver or whatever.
No,
Mm.
that's I relate to that a lot actually. It's definitely one of those industries where you do have to give it your all, especially in the early stages whilst you're developing your reel. And yeah, like you, I didn't think or know there was jobs in the industry. So I'm glad that you sort of took the leap and went into it because it's obviously doing very well for you.
Yeah, so far so good. Like I think as well now, maybe students like there's more and more knowledge around now, even
Mm.
from when I started, which I'm sure other people will be looking at me and being like, "Hey, you had so much knowledge when I started, like way back in mid 2000s or something." It would be like, just completely different. But that was back when like Craig Mullins and stuff were on forums giving people critiques. It's like it just seems crazy to think of now.
Well,
Um,
yeah, like it's getting bigger and bigger, isn't it? Especially in Adelaide.
yeah, yeah. I mean, having um, like sort of the education of like the schools as well as like now jobs have kind of I don't know if they've necessarily followed the schools, but there's like multiple VFX houses that are quite big. Obviously, Rising Sun and Mr. X and such. So yeah, it's kind of yeah, it's going well, I think.
So on that train of thought, why don't you just tell us a little bit about the school that you studied at? So my understanding was that you were at CDW.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So CDW Studios was started by Simon Scales, and he originally studied at CDA, and I think that's how the kind of naming scheme has got convoluted as it has. Um, and basically, it started out as a private school, but now is associated with Flinders University. So it has a full accredited program that kind of goes through their Bachelor of Visual Effects and Entertainment Design, is now called. And yeah, so I studied 3 years as a bachelor and 1 year as honors there, and um, basically learned fundamentals of drawing, painting, 3D modeling. This is all from a digital perspective, though. When I say like drawing and painting, it's, I mean, you still have a sketchbook and pen and paper and stuff, but like we didn't really do like oil painting. We just did digital painting, but we still did still life stuff. So setting up, vases and fruit and that sort of thing, which is like really good, is really, really good study, as well as life drawing, of which I didn't go to probably that many sessions of, to be honest.
I always say I'm going to do it. I never do it.
Yeah, it's so hard. It's like people think life drawing is hard because it's a naked person standing up there or something, but really it's just hard because people are really hard to draw. Like I remember my first session, it was like I had some felt tip pen and it was the hardest thing to draw with, and like I didn't know how to draw people, and there's just this naked old man in front of me standing like but it's good. It's good. It's like amazing practice for figures. Anyway, yeah. So, and that was great. Like my teachers there were sort of fantastic, and like Ned Rogers and Alex Owen, Simon Scales, and Alex Colvin. There's Tim McBurney. Sorry, I'm just like listing names now. This is not very entertaining.
No, that's all right. I know a few of them myself. They're all awesome people.
They are all awesome people, and it's a good it's like good atmosphere as well. And I think one of the things though with school I started to find after 4 years was that you do get out of it what you put in, and that's something that I think is a really important message that like, and I'm not saying I'm like probably the one to tell you that message or like people that message, but like I think as a thing that probably a lot of people would tell you is like, yeah, it really is, you get out what you put in. And I think those teachers also like react to that real well, where they'll they'll really push you if you're like trying to, you want to be pushed. So
yeah,
I enjoyed it a lot.
It's fantastic. And so I guess I'd love to know a little bit about what you're doing with yourself now that you've finished.
Yeah. So I did actually have like some communication with studios overseas at the start of the year, but things obviously didn't really work out so well for that.
So well.
No. And even remote work at that time was still, I think just everything was sort of a little bit crazy. Now I'm getting more communication with studios about like remote jobs and that sort of thing. But one of the advantages I did have though is with the guy who basically started CDW Studios, the school, he's started up an animation studio, and they're basically, it's sort of a studio creating like an animation for a series. It recently got funded by Epic Games with like a big grant, so it's good to have sort of money coming in. It means more jobs, and more jobs mean actually kind of making things and like, I guess, potentially kind of shipping a product, which is something that I think basically everybody wants to do in this industry, is you want to produce something that actually gets enjoyed by people. So it's an exciting time. And basically I'm working at this animation studio, also called CDW Animation rather than CDW, the school. And I'm working there as kind of like a hybrid job because it's a small studio. So I do involve myself in design, but it's also a lot of like making stuff for use in Unreal Engine. So it's kind of a very 3D heavy job as well. But yeah, it's super fun.
Wicked. And Just out of curiosity, what are you using Unreal Engine for?
It's actually becoming more and more like useful as a, uh, I guess a kind of like a render engine, really. Like so,
Yeah.
it's like a game engine, but because I guess game engine stuff is like incorporating more like ray tracing effects and path
Mm.
tracing effects, you it's kind of getting to this point where for particular styles of animation, for sure, like you can kind of it's I don't want to say it is or not the same quality. I would argue it isn't really this. You can't do the same things that you can do
Mm.
in I don't know, Arnold or whatever rendering engines people use. But there are certain things that you can do, and you can iterate really quickly because you kind of it's like what you see is what you get. Whereas I guess in a traditional VFX pipeline, it requires a lot of like it's kind of a different sort of organization, I think. I mean, I can't speak to really not like know how it is in like a VFX house, but I think being able to like work in an engine where you kind of see the result as you're building it
Mm.
is very much like useful to be able to kind of I guess create in real time. Um, and Unreal definitely like is useful for that kind of workflow, which I think works really well with small teams. So
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, honestly, Jay, even I was just having this discussion myself last week with the guys. Unreal Engine really seems like the way forward with even VFX as well, like just the speed and the iterations. And it seems to be getting more and more like the gap between what you might see in Arnold and Unreal Engine is just seems to be getting smaller and smaller. So it's
Yeah.
fantastic that you're sort of staying ahead of the curve and learning all of that technology.
I
Sounds
think
like
it's
CDW is really preparing you.
Yeah, that stuff, I think I mean, that's a conversation that happens around the office as well a lot, is about that kind of progression specifically. But for me personally, I've always been interested in kind of video games from a technical standpoint. Like I
Mm.
watch a lot of game developer conference videos on things I half the time don't even really understand, but I get like little bits kind of from it. And I think the kind of I don't want to say like tricks, but the things that game developers have to go through to get to like an end result that's as quick as it is is kind of really fascinating and
Quite challenging, isn't it?
quite challenging. Yeah, there's a lot of like I guess optimization that
Mm.
is required, and that kind of in the past always interests me, as well as being able to create things in a real time setting is really I don't know, playful in a way, like being able
Mm.
to like move trees around and they look like trees being moved around rather than grey, meshy sort of blobs. My
Wicked,
viewport.
wicked. Um, so I guess you were talking, when COVID hit. Just out of curiosity, did that affect your studies at all?
No, not for study. For me, I kind of dodged the bullet on that one, but one of my housemates is currently doing honors. I don't know if it's affecting him that much either. It's kind of like maybe in that period of time where it was
Yeah.
very hands off and they were transitioning into remote learning, but because all of the classes were set up to be recorded anyway, it was kind of like fairly easy. It was I guess honing down the communication aspect.
Mm.
But I think that being said, I'm speaking for like he's a pretty dedicated student, whereas like some and dedicated I don't mean on the standpoint of like I think he finds it easy to be independent, whereas like some
Mm.
students I think
Some people hate that.
yeah, and I think some students have struggled a lot. So I'm not saying that, oh yeah, COVID's all easy breezy and like study isn't hard during it. I think it totally is for, um, and I've talked to teachers and stuff, and yeah, I think it is hard for some students, definitely. Um,
Yeah, I think we dodged a bullet a little bit in Adelaide, hey? Like,
for
because I was
sure, yeah,
teaching a few courses, and for me, like, nothing. Oh, I mean, obviously, we had to space everyone out. My cat just got into something. um, obviously, like, for Adelaide, we did have that period of time where we shut down, but for the most part, we've been able to deliver in person, so it's been really quite good.
yeah,
We're
yeah.
quite fortunate. So, Jay, I guess I'd like to, talk a little bit about your rookies entry. What made you decide to enter the rookies this year?
I mean, this year it kind of just is like a rolling ball after a while, where you're like, I'll be trying to enter the rookies in next year, and it's like, no, you're not allowed to anymore. Um, no, but I guess originally, probably what I will say is like my lecturer, Katie Kavanagh, who I had in university, she was the one who, I guess it was her and Alwyn and stuff were like the ones that started to, I guess, make the students aware of the rookies. And then it kind of just sort of, yeah, snowballed from there, where it became a sort of thing that pretty much everyone entered the rookies, just because, once people start doing something, then everyone kind of wants to do it. Yeah. And I mean, in a good competitive way. And I think it's very interesting though, and I guess why a lot of people do it, and myself included, is doing anything internationally. I think that's like a big, particularly for Australia, that is physically very far away from the rest of the world, is kind of cool to, like, I don't know, have that side of things. So I know that's probably a big thing that I've got out of it, is like just to be able to see other people's work and kind of feel like you're connected with other students who are in France or in America, or South America, or wherever. Like, it's just I don't think you get it on the same level anywhere else as like a student thing. Like, I mean, sure, there's other sort of image sites and stuff that like have people from all over the world, but it's like they're not really there for the same. Well, they are there for the same reason, but it's like it's not so much like a student focused thing, which I think is a big deal. But yeah.
Brilliant. So why don't you just tell us as well just a little bit about your rookies entry itself?
Yeah. Let's see if I can bring it up for myself as well to remember what I put in there.
So you got quite a few pieces in there. I went through them.
Yeah, so like it's kind of mainly an honors project, I think, for the most part. The majority of the thing, if not, yeah, about over half of it is all from the one world. And that was basically, I guess, an amalgamation of things I'm interested in. And I guess I'll talk about that briefly. That was like an honors project. So we kind of had, it was fairly flexible in university. Actually, we kind of like do whatever you wanted. And the teachers, they would guide you into kind of giving yourself deliverables. And it was as much like project planning as it was the actual project itself. In terms of my sort of interests is environment art, particularly like my brain is always leading more towards video games, but I think my content ends up being like, you could use it for animation or video games or whatever. But yeah, and I like turn of the century stuff, in terms of like early 1900s. I think that time period in, or at least I know, actually not even just Europe, like the whole world kind of had, well, you had like the outcome of like the Industrial Revolution and things like that, which I guess escalated a lot of parts of the world and escalated in particular architecture. And that's something that I have a strong interest in, is architecture, and I guess particularly like civic architecture, which is like kind of public spaces. I think that is something that is there's a lot of freedom for creating space that's sort of usable, but it's also iconic and yeah, just bold, I guess. So my project was basically set in a like, it's not really steampunk, yeah, it's kind of like a neo or like a retro future, I guess. So it's basically like if things in the past moved in a different direction, and maybe history, like an alternate history, I guess. Yeah. And my idea for that was basically like France. I like a lot of Art Nouveau and things that came out of France in that sort of time. And I really wanted to kind of have something where it was like that ornamentation just kind of stuck, and it didn't really kind of go into industrialization, which became sort of kind of rigid in the style, where things were kind of made for like purely from a practicality standpoint, I kind of liked the idea of ornamentation taking over at an earlier stage. So just like crazy curvy metal buildings um, and an influx of like I guess electricity, which kind of would create different technologies and such, and like electric trains and nuclear power was something that I wanted. I think nuclear power just because um, it's kind of provocative. Like it's kind of gives people this idea of
Controversial.
like, yeah, it's something that can kill you, and it's something that is bad for, storing waste and having to mine and all those sorts of things. So from a narrative standpoint, like having something that has a nuclear power kind of basis is something that kind of gives people like there's this sole source of this energy, and particularly if you start having that energy be maybe wielded by people of like a sinister um, uh, like a kind of bad people, I suppose, then you kind of have this thing of this is the source of their power, this soul sort of thing. And I guess that's why I picked nuclear power. Not to get too much into the controversial topics. Oh, hello.
Sorry, my cat's still on my headphones. Wow. So you came up with all, like, did you design that story yourself or was that in a group?
No, that was just my sort of thing. I don't know
Wow.
if it's like all that much of a story. It was kind of basically the story I did have going in the back of my head, which I didn't really lean into all that much, was like the rise of automation taking away, I guess, making a divide between the rich and the poor. So it's basically just like the standard story of industrialization, creating, uh, getting the rich to be richer and the poor to be poorer, and it's kind of like reality. I don't know.
Wow.
um,
Um,
mm,
so I'm sorry, I'm just looking through your artwork. There's just so many little details. It's incredible. Um, I would love to know a little bit about your creative process. When you start a project, from start to finish, what are the different steps that you take to achieve that final look? You mentioned to me before that you used Blender and a bit of 3D programs as well.
yeah, yeah. Like I'm pretty heavy on the 3D, but I still basically start every single thing with drawing. However, my drawings are like so loose, to put it politely, for myself, is that they're kind of like once I look at them, the process of drawing them is the thing that I understand in my head of like what I'm doing. As in, sometimes my drawing doesn't even read as like the thing that it's supposed to be, but in the process of drawing it, I see things in the drawing where I'm just like, yeah, like I understand what's going on here. I know like because I tend to do facades, like as in like the fronts of buildings and or like an elevation, like the side view. If it's more prominent, it's basically like whatever is the more prominent side of the building, and then I'll kind of just sketch that out and pick and choose from there, and sometimes like you know mush parts of the drawings together, and then I go into 3D pretty quickly after then. These particular ones, I was also starting out with a texture set that I had kind of made from just painting in Photoshop, and then like adding like a metallicness in Blender, and also creating normal maps from bitmap to material, substance bitmap to material, yeah, which just kind of gave me with a like a I guess it like kind of creates like a mood and a color palette through the materiality of the structures, and also means that you can kind of UV and create uh, your models sort of at the same time. So it's pretty efficient once you sort of get going, and you're almost designing with the textures. So like, say you're like, oh, I wonder what if the roof panels, went in the opposite direction or something like that. You can just, move the texture around in the UV space, and you're like, can see the result instantly, and you can be like, okay, that looks better, or this works, or this doesn't. And yeah, so texturing was, like sometimes you go too far where you start getting like too into like, oh, this is going to be like a slightly different brick, and it's like, does it really matter? Probably not. But yeah, for some of the things like metal paneling, it was totally
Good.
useful to kind of do texturing and modeling at the same time.
Yeah.
And it allowed me to have really simple sketches and kind of quickly iterate in 3D after that. But
Okay, so just out of curiosity, we've got someone in the audience who's just asked the question.
Yeah.
So how much percentage would you say your final piece would be 3D as opposed to the final paint over?
99% 3D. Honestly,
Really?
like they're basically all of my scenes are like a 3D render. There is,
Wow.
um, yeah, I'm just like looking back through them. Yeah, pretty much. There's like a few little things like foam on some of the water, and some like the train station have a fair bit of paint overs. Sorry, I'm not seeing what ones you're
That's all
scrolling through
right.
if you are, but yeah, for majority of them, it's like it's just a yeah, like just a render. Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Um, like I think some I composited in a sky, but other than that, it's kind of yeah, like 98% 3D or something.
Sounds like it varies a little bit depending on what project you're doing and
Yeah,
what you need.
definitely.
Hey,
Yeah.
so it's good that you're keeping your skills open, and all of those skills are quite easily transferable. So well done.
Yeah, I do a lot of like, although these are all kind of 3D in terms of like when I'm designing them out. One thing I do as well that I highly recommend for people who do want to do more in 3D is if you're ever like at a stage where you don't know where to go, or you've done a sketch and then you've modeled something in 3D and then you're like, okay, cool, I'm so confused. Like I kind of like this, but I don't know like what to do next. Is I do heaps of just like hard round brush paint overs where it just be like get like full opacity brush, pick colors from whatever 3D screenshot or render you have, and just go over the top and like
Okay.
scribble out what you think might help the image, or and then you can quickly see it's like, oh no, hey, that doesn't work. Hey, this whole layout is kind of a bit wonky. You know, let's just change this whole big area. So I do a lot of paint overs, but in terms of the actual final image, that's kind of like I'll do the paint over and then I'll go back into the 3D,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
then I'm pretty like quick to be able to
Yeah.
like, build it out. Yeah.
Oh, wicked. That's really cool that's really cool to hear. Um, so I guess Jay, what advice would you give to someone entering the rookies next year?
It depends on what level they're at. I mean, if for beginners, it's kind of just put yourself out there. Like um, I would like my thing for beginners though as well would be like just make sure you have something that feels like it is a representation of what you currently want to do and where you're sort of at with stuff. Because you can put in stuff that is maybe like homework or something that isn't really your thing, but I would at least like try and if you can focus on something where you're like, hey, this is the current thing that I want to where I want to go with my art or my yeah, whatever. But in terms of like more advanced students, I would say I think it's kind of good to focus on project-based stuff. Like mine is pretty much all, like I said, it's like 60, 70% like one project, but I have a couple of other projects at the tail end of it. I would say, yeah, like do two or maybe three projects. That just tends to be the advice that I hear from uh, like more experienced artists on portfolios as well, is to have a couple of projects that have multiple works of art or multiple designs that are from the same
Same
world.
world.
Yeah. And that's, I think, as particularly for like in the beginning stages, you might not be able to do that quite so much. And I almost would advise not focusing too much on that at like early years, but later years, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I think that's very easily transferable into like a showreel advice too. Hey, just don't spread yourself too thin. Have a few really strong pieces.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And I
it's
think like in terms of 3D artists, like I don't really have as much knowledge or experience with that, but I think having little dioramas seems to be the thing I see propel people, like if, for modelers that is, um, or like 3D environment artists for games and stuff is like small but polished, but also not just for those sorts of jobs. It's like not just individual props. Like some people I think go individual props and it's like you're kind of pigeonholing yourself into like having that as your job, whereas like some other studios, particularly game studios, I think they like to see how like you get a variety of props and have them in the same set. Like, and that, yeah, for 3D artists, I reckon that's something that I see tends to get people jobs. So, yeah.
No, Jay, that's honestly some really, really solid advice. So thank you so much for sharing that.
No worries.
All right. Well, I can't. It's already 9 o'clock. We run out of time, guys. But yeah, thank you so much, Jay, for joining me this week. Really
No
awesome to chat with you and to meet with you. And
problem.
maybe I'll see you around sometime.
Yeah, bump into each other on the street.
All right.
All right.
Yeah, well, guys. Yeah, thanks for watching. And please tune in next week. We like to keep this pretty interactive. So if you have any questions, please, jump on and shoot us a little message in the chat, and we'll, try and answer them. So awesome. See you next time, guys. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.